All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in today to the Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer, and this is going to be a sweet treat of a day. We have a couple of really interesting special guests on, and I'd like to introduce them. Melanie Bowden Simón. Am I saying that correctly, Melanie?
Yeah, it's Bowden, but that's
Bowden.
okay.
Okay,
It's
Bowden.
Melanie
I'm
Bowden
sorry.
Simón. You got the Simone? No, it's fine.
Yeah, and Stratton Leopold. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Awesome.
Doing
And
very well.
Yeah,
yeah, so I'm really excited to have y'all on today, and we're going to be talking about your new book, Leopold's Ice Cream: A Century of Tasty Memories. And so I'm pretty excited to have y'all here today.
We're excited to
well,
be
we,
here.
we thank you. Yes, it's a pleasure being here.
Yeah, I have a little story about Leopold's. I have lived in Savannah since 1996, and I've never had Leopold's ice cream. I'm sorry, I apologize. I've never had it until my birthday this year. And I was downtown. I just stopped by and and I was like, why have I not been going to Leopold's all these years? I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I missing out on here? This is crazy. Um,
It's a, it's a must
yeah,
Yeah,
when you're in
that,
Savannah.
that, that's a very good question. Why haven't you?
I know. I could kick myself. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. So, little backstory, everybody. A
Yeah,
couple weeks ago, I had interviewed Melanie about the book for the Savannah Morning News Do Savannah, and I was like, you know what, I would love, because it reminded me so much of like when I was a kid. Sitting around listening to the stories. My parents and grandparents and stuff talked about, and it just reminded me so much of that. Like those family stories, and yeah. So could you talk to us a little bit about how the genesis of the book came around, and where it took off from there.
I think Melanie can because it happened in the back seat.
Of my husband's car.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, that was crazy. So, um, well, Stratton and I had met prior when my first book had come out, and we had started talking about book to film development on that, and so that was how I was really met Stratton. And soon after, his wife Mary, I was able to meet her, and we were very much kindred spirits. And so one night we were all going to go to dinner, my husband and I, and Stratton and Mary, and to the Greek restaurant downtown. And my husband had an old 57 Chevy. And so we said, why don't we come pick you up in the car? And, we were driving downtown and the windows were rolled down, and my husband's Cuban and he had Cuban music playing. And it was just, we were
it
having a
was a
lot of fun.
a
It, it,
glorious evening. It
it
really
really
was.
was.
Yeah,
It was just a perfect summer Savannah night. It was a really beautiful night. And it was so funny. So Mary and I are in the back seat talking, and we related on sort of, on different levels, because she and Stratton both grew up in Greek American homes. And my house is Cuban American, and, raising kids and all of this sort of different thematic things that come with that, and the differences in the bicultural homes. And we were talking about all these things, and I just started to feel Mary, that she wanted to ask me something, and I could just feel it. And she finally just sort of spit it out, and she said, we've wanted to write this book for, something, I don't know, upwards of 20 years, and would you consider writing this book?
Oh
And
wow.
of course, I just spit it out. Yes, of course. I mean, how could I not? And then a little bit of fear slightly ensued soon after. I say that slightly in jest, but I thought, oh my goodness, this is someone else's story, and it's such an important story, especially in Savannah, and really honored that they, entrusted me with that. And it's lovely also because I'm from Savannah, so it's one of my own hometown stories as well. And that was sort of how it kicked off. Um, and then we had to set about trying to figure out how we were actually going to put 100 years of history in one book, something that was digestible and not too overwhelming. And certainly there was writing and a lot of research behind the writing, but then that is, of course, supported with the many, many, many photos and menus. I mean, Stratton literally, he keeps everything. And so he has these incredible, it's like a museum of not only Leopold's, but of, Savannah. and our community. Meaning he can tell you more than I can, but he has menus. There are old pencils from Leopold's from the early days, to
Straws.
straws,
Oh wow.
newspaper clippings, obviously many photos, family photos. There's some of the original signs, and he can, tell you a cool story with Savannah Tech that helped him restore some of those signs, and et cetera. And so we just kind of sat back and thought, oh gosh, how do we take this on? And it was, really about a 2.5 year process.
And hundreds of photographs. It was interesting because back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, there were prolific photograph takers. I mean, I had cousins from various states sending photos that I had not seen of the shop, of my parents, what have you. And it was fascinating to see that. Plus, the hundreds of negatives that I had that had not been printed that we scanned and saw for the first time.
Yes, his niece was just amazing and had helped scan many of those in, and we couldn't have even we couldn't have managed it without that. So
I think it is a beautiful book. I looked at it and saw it down at the East Shaver booksellers right after it came out, and it's just a beautiful, especially like not just being a historical book, but also it's just I love images, I love imagery, and I especially love like Americana, and it's Leopold's reminds me so much of like what is good about the U.S. and America and Americana and family values. And it's just something I think is very special and unique. And so, again, I'm really happy to be able to talk with y'all today. It's just a blessing. Tell me, like, what comes to mind? Actually, you know what? I'd like to throw this out there real quick. Right before the show started, we were talking about a friend of mine, Ed Susevich, who's also a host here on WRUU, and his parents met at Leopold's. So
that's quite true.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I remember the Susevich brothers, and David, who's his father, met Helen Marie Davis there at the shop, and they dated. And in fact, we have some photographs that Helen sent to us, and they married. And there are instances like that. We have a huge number of letters that people have sent us about meeting there, about first dates. We have photographs of first dates from back in the 40s and 50s, and just an amazing trove, if you will, of Savannah.
It really is. I have the book open to page 65. That's theirs, and it's called Love at the Lunch Counter. And we have these wonderful photos of them, and then actually the day they got married, and their story, like many of the other stories that we received, they were really moving stories. These are not just what you think of, these are nice little letters to an ice cream shop. These are family stories. They're love stories, and it's really amazing.
Would you mind doing a reading for us?
Sure. This is Helen Marie Davis Susevich. And she says, Love at the Lunch Counter. And Helen Marie Davis began working as a waitress at the original Leopold's located at the corner of Gwinnett and Habersham Streets when she was a teenager in the mid-1950s. Helen would walk from her family's home on Huntington Street to work her shift behind the luncheonette counter. Helen worked full-time serving tuna salad sandwiches, Coke floats, and banana splits. One of her frequent customers was a dashing young man, David Julian Susevich, who lived along Troop Square. Their courtship was over the counter, literally. David would walk Helen home after her evening shift. It was on such an evening stroll that David eventually proposed. Helen and David were married July 28, 1962. Helen worked for the Leopold brothers for almost 10 years. Helen and David had 3 children, David Jr., Diane, and Ed. The Leopold lovebirds, quote unquote, were married for 50 years. Anyway, this was, it's just a beautiful story, and we received numerous stories, not obviously that exact story, but similar, and they talk about as well bringing in their grandchildren years later, and it's really an amazing thing. That's a great story. I love that story, and the photos are wonderful as well.
Yes.
And if I understand correctly, Mary, your wife, Stratton, she had an integral part in this whole thing as well, right?
Yes, I mean she was pushing it for years, and we kept saying, yeah, we'll do it, we'll do it, and and, and
Until the fateful evening in the car.
I know it. Oh Lord, yes, the car did it because I, I was off doing some films, I was doing other things, and as well as making ice cream. So it was a several year project.
Yes, Mary and I worked very closely together, and I mean, I just probably bugged her to no end because just especially as it um, got closer, as I really was trying to hone in more and more on specific details. And well, even in the beginning, there were a lot of interviews. I interviewed Stratton, I interviewed Mary, interviewed them together. And the great thing about interviewing them together was, Stratton was telling me stories, and then Mary might say, "Oh, hey, don't you remember that one time with your mom? Or she used to make this," and he, and so Stratton would, "Oh, great." So they kind of would bounce ideas back and forth, and that was really helpful for me. And hearing all the different angles and all the different stories. And then I started to really, well, I researched so many different things and learned so many different things. I learned so much about my own city, many things I felt silly for not knowing, but I got quite an education. And then I, researched ice cream, and I didn't know about ice cream itself, that it used to be really only for royalty and for early American presidents, until, later it was served en masse. But I also learned a bit about Greece. It was fascinating to me to go into the Ellis Island website, and I was literally searching for the ship that Stratton's family came over on. And I was not able to find it, but his niece was. And so she was amazing. She did some wonderful research as well. And she found the actual ship, and we have the photo, in the book. It started to bring that to life, and what they actually went through a little bit. I mean, obviously, I wish I could, could interview them, of course, directly, but we were trying to recreate a portion of what they, saw and did when they came over from Greece and started their journey here. And then as, the story, I don't know, got closer and closer to trying to wrap it up, Mary was just, incredible. I was constantly back and forth with her on very specific details. And, imagine too, a lot of these photos that Stratton still has from the 30s and 40s and so on, we were trying to figure out, what decade they were from. At just first glance, you couldn't necessarily figure that out. So Mary's looking at it going, okay, they would or wouldn't have had this particular machine, and she knew and was able to figure out when the photo was, and and so on. So it was a lot. Mary was just incredible in the whole process.
It's also trying to figure, for instance, relatives. My Uncle Gus from Baltimore. What did he look like in 1930? And I have to think back. Okay, I knew him in 1950. That had to be him. That's him. It's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And in a foreword by President Carter, that happened I guess because of Mary as well, in as much as on her bucket list, among other things, was going to Sunday school. This is years ago. This happened when President Carter was teaching Sunday school. So I said, okay, well, I don't know him. But anyway, we'll see what we can do. And at the time, I was Jill. I was sitting on the board I still am, of Coastal Heritage, and Jill Stuckey was on the board back then. And I knew she was from Plains. And I said, Jill, tell me about Sunday school. Oh, yes, any Sunday's always there. I said, well, we'll drive down one Sunday morning early and go to Sunday school if that's okay. She said, yeah, but why don't you come down the night before? She has a B&B there in Plains. And we'll have dinner and go to church in the morning. We said, okay. Well, we didn't realize that President and Mrs. Carter have dinner with her all the time.
No.
So dinner was sitting across the table from President Carter.
Isn't that how life is? It's like, just those little neat happenstances.
Yeah. And much to the chagrin of the Secret Service, we weren't clear. They're in the next room, and what the heck is going on? So anyway, there were several trips that we took down there, and I got to know them. We talked about a film I'm doing that he happened to be in China as a young midshipman at the time. Anyway, a young lieutenant on a submarine at the time. Anyway, I thought about it, and then after speaking with Melanie, I wondered if he would consider doing something. So we asked, and he accepted.
I mean,
That's
talk
just a
about
wonderful.
floored. I
Yeah.
know. I literally, I remember. I mean, this was, and he agreed to do it not that long before
I
we were
know.
set to publish, and so, um, obviously, it was just one of those things. I wasn't necessarily waiting on. I didn't know if it would happen or not,
That's right. That's right.
and I remember, I will never forget. It was literally like Saturday night at 7 o'clock, and I see Stratton calling, and I pick up the phone, and he's like, "I just want you to know, President Carter agreed to do it." And I almost dropped the phone, and I thought, "Oh
Oh
man, we
wow.
really gotta make sure this
Oh.
book is on point."
Oh wow!
And
Hold that thought, y'all. You everybody, you're
sure,
tuning in today. We're listening to WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. Speaking of family, my son Sebastian is my co-host with the show, and he always plays live music. So he's got this new song, and I'm going to have him play right now. All right, this is Sebastian Messer. You just learned this week, right? Yeah. Thank you, Bass. That's Don McLean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's the song title?
And I Love You So.
Yeah, I love that song. It's beautiful. So thank you. So yeah, that's really interesting. I was going to ask you. I actually, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about was, that story with President Carter, and I wanted to ask as well, like, what was it growing up? What was it like growing up in the ice cream shop? Because I know in the story it was talking about originally they learned how to make candy and ice cream. So
Correct.
yeah, what was it like? What was it like growing up? Let's go back to the growing up part though, but I'd like to go more back into the Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter story. So you're at dinner, the Secret Service is like, "What is going on?" And then
Yeah,
you get
exactly.
the call. Tell me more about that.
Well, it was great. I mean, there were like 4, 5, 6 people at dinner, and we're directly across the table from them. So, I mean, former president of the United States, you're talking. Hi, how are you?
He just seems so down to earth because, like, he's always doing that Habitat for
completely.
Humanity, and
We talked about that completely. And the facts I learned, Mrs. Carter said, "Well, you do realize at the White House, I kept the books." And I said, "No, I didn't realize that."
What?
She said, "Yes, I was in charge of that." I said, "Well, then if ever we do a film or whatever, we'd have to talk." No, they're amazing. They're amazing. Yeah, they really are. He was kind enough to. There's a film that I will make. It'll be a couple of films away, but it involves a true story of a young Chinese boy, U.S. Marines, in China in 1949 when they left. And when they left, there was a submarine in the harbor, and it was USS Pomfret. And aboard the submarine was a young lieutenant, a 1948 graduate of Annapolis named Jimmy Carter. So I'm telling him the story. He looked at me. He said, "I was there." And I knew he was. I knew before. I said, "I know you were, President Carter." And then we talked about that. And he's such a generous man. I asked Jill after I came back to Savannah, do you think he would consider letting us film him, not necessarily about his presidency, but about the impression of a young man in China in 1949 for a sizzle reel that we put together to get awareness for the picture? And she said, "Well, write the letter. I'll put it in his hands, but he always turns that down. Be prepared." Well, he accepted. So we filmed him for that as well. We have wonderful. We filmed for an hour, and we got into the presidency too about Deng Xiaoping, because, and with the history I did not know, when Mao died, Deng Xiaoping had been relegated to just exiled, really. But he came back to power, and Jimmy Carter was president, and they became friends and set up parts of China. Then it was interesting
Amazing.
sidebar to history. Now I must say something else before. I think Melanie's being very modest. Her book has won a bunch of awards,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she has won an author award. Yes, there's a lot going on here.
Well, I was able to tell a really fantastic story, and we certainly worked very, very, very hard on it. But it really, it really was
Well,
a
you've done a
joy.
fabulous job too. So
Well, thank you. And, it became very personal. I mean, it's not my story, it's not my family, but very much took it to heart. And, I certainly wanted to do a good job, and I wanted to. It's also really hard. You wanted to tell the story. Um,
You also want to
I
honor
guess
that legacy though as
I
well.
want to honor the
Yeah,
legacy.
yeah. I know what you
I
mean.
didn't want it to sound like a history report either. I
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to try and really try to bring those stories to life as much as possible. Obviously, it's easier, because so in the middle of they're kind of three parts. So there aren't specific chapters, but what we kind of were calling the middle part of the book. Um, is about Stratton's career in Hollywood, and it's fascinating. And so, of course, those stories which are fantastic, by the way, and I didn't get them all in there. I'm hoping Stratton will do a memoir, but he has so many stories to tell, like the one he just told you right now with the Carters. So many fantastic stories. Um, and those he brought to life. One of my favorite stories he told is the one with Robin Williams in the airport, and I was literally like
oh,
crying laughing when he's telling me this story about him with the Italian accent beret, and he's making this whole scene in the airport. And
Well, let's
in
hear it.
Rome.
Yeah, let's hear it.
You'll hear. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I was producing a movie called The Adventures of Baron Munchausen,
that's you.
and yeah,
No. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Oh my gosh. That
You,
is one of my
you got to
favorite
read
cult
the
movies.
credits. You
Oh my
got to read
gosh.
the main title credits.
I'm
mm-hmm.
so sorry. I know that you do a lot of stuff in Hollywood. I didn't realize that you did that movie. That's one of my favorites.
Stratton's
I
done a
saw the
lot.
Thank you.
poster
Oh, wow.
at
Yeah.
Leopold's and I didn't realize. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy.
Well, anyway, the role of the King of the Moon was supposed to be played by Sean Connery, but who's a friend of the Pythons, had been for a while. The schedule kept changing. Everything was changing. Sean called us up and said, with his brogue, I can't do it. Can't do it now. Oh Lord. So we had a meeting. And Terry wanted his buddy, what's his name? Terry, the fish called Wanda, who started it, not Cleese, the younger one.
Uh,
Terry, I can't think of his last
I
name.
can't remember.
Anyway, Terry Gilliam wanted him to take the role. And I said, Terry, he's not going to sell many tickets in America, because that was before Fish Called Wanda. And I said, we got to get somebody else. And Terry said, fine, get me, who did he mentioned a couple of people, including Robin. So then he leaves the room. And I'm sitting there with Eric Idle. And Eric is more of the businessman with the Pythons in many ways. So I'm saying, oh, Lord, the agents are going to kill me now because they know I'm desperate. So Eric said, do you want to consider Robin? And I said, of course. He said, I know him. I said, call him. So he did. I flew to San Francisco, met with Robin, and he was with Marcia Garces at the time, and went to his home, and just, of course, he was amazing. What you see is what you got. Is constant.
Yeah.
Um, he actually, I arranged to have dinner with Paul Zantz up in San Francisco. As a friend whose uncle was a famous producer. Did 3 Academy Awards he got. Anyway, Robin gave me a ride to dinner, and he had a Vanagon, and every stop sign, every sign he'd see, he'd do 5 minutes on. So the time came to come to Rome to film. So my sister was visiting Rome at the time. So we had arranged at the airport there in Rome I made all the arrangements to have a car on the other side of passport control, right by the tarmac there, get him off the plane, get him in the car, gone. So the plane, he was coming in on Sunday. So my sister and I go to the airport on Sunday. Now, of course, the arrangements I made with all the airport people were not there on Sundays. No one knew a doggone thing. So I'm talking my way into behind passport control. So I finally did. I said, you have to understand, I have an American movie star coming, blah, blah, blah. So we get back there. The plane lands. I forgot TWA or Pan Am. It came from New York. And we know he got on the plane. We made sure of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the plane lands and they shuttle in. Here comes the first little shuttle. No Robin. The second shuttle. No Robin. What the hell's going on?
Mm-hmm.
The third shuttle. So I know he got on the plane. I know he did. I don't understand. And then somebody taps me on the shoulder. I turn around and there's nobody there. And he's on the floor. He leaps up wearing a red beret, speaking with an Italian accent.
What?
I said, Robin, get in the car. The car's right over. Get in the car. No. I go to passport control. I go there. Then I go to baggage claim. I said, no, get in the car. He runs off. He goes to baggage claim.
Oh, no.
So then the photography starts. And he's right in the middle. I said, well, we're in it now. So do the best we can. But he was just amazing fellow, amazing talent, just truly.
I remember as a kid watching Mork and Ork with him.
Mindy,
Mork and Mindy, yeah.
Mork and Mindy, that was my favorite. He was such a that was my question for Stratton.
Happy Days, like when he was on that.
Time. Yes.
Yeah, I was like, what? And then he had he had stand up and all those different movies that he did, and just a wonderful guy. I mean, I love him.
Yeah.
I love him.
And I remember Stratton told me, we've got it in there that, I said Stratton had mentioned that you'd give him a script and just sort of hope for the best because he would just take off.
Just turn the camera on and see what happens.
I heard that about like his scene in Aladdin where he played the very first, the opening where he played the merchant or whatever. That whole thing was just ad-libbed. I was like, wow. That's an amazing guy.
So Stratton has amazing, fantastic stories, and they're really, all I had to do was sit and capture them. I mean, that was easy and so entertaining and interesting, but then also, beyond that, I mean, that is wonderful, and I love that they share that in the shop downtown on Broughton Street. But Stratton and many of his peers, they really started super early on when no one was doing film and TV in Georgia.
Right.
Back in the 70s.
They really, I mean, they definitely paid their dues, and Stratton did everything. I mean, he was, in front of, behind the camera and all different things. And so it was really interesting to understand how that progressed, and this, of course, we know what that is today. And so that really was Stratton and his peers who kicked all of that off a very long time ago. So that was interesting for me to learn more about as well. And so really fascinating stuff.
And that was all prior to Georgia having a film incentive. It was all just because Georgia became popular.
I love it. We're going to take our mid-hour break, y'all.
Okay.
And we're going to be back in a couple minutes here. Everybody, you're tuning in today. This is the Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer. And we're talking all about Leopold's Ice Cream, a century of tasty memories. So we'll be back in just a couple minutes here.
Many critical issues are facing the residents of Savannah and all Americans, including the coronavirus, homeschooling, and the upcoming general election. WRUU has 3 programs which address these issues: The Common Good on Fridays from 2 to 3 p.m., The Happy Homeschooler on Wednesdays from 2 to 3 p.m., and We the People, The Constitution Today on Sundays from 8 to 9 p.m. Stay informed about these important issues by tuning into these programs on WRUU. This portion of WRUU LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by listeners like you and Brighter Day Natural Foods. Brighter Day is celebrating its 40th year serving the Savannah community with produce, vitamins, and supplements, and a deli and juice bar. Brighter Day is located at 1102 Bull Street at the south end of Forsyth Park. More information available at 912-236-4703 or brighterdayfoods.com.
WRUU 107.5 FM is a new and different listener-supported and all-volunteer community radio station for Savannah. Our diverse broadcast and web programming is supported by generous listeners who value our passion and spunk. We are independent of other media and receive no government or large corporate support. People like you are our largest and most important source of our funding. Go to wruu.org to find out how you can make a one-time or a monthly contribution. Thank you.
All right, everybody, we are back. And just to piggyback off of those announcements, this is an all-volunteer station, and we are a community radio station. So, if you like what you listen to, if you like the different programming we have, have a thought in mind, maybe consider a donation or two. WRUU.org. So thank you very much. Okay, so Stratton and Melanie, I'm so glad to have y'all on the show today. And one of the things I loved as a kid was the storytelling. I write. I'm an author myself. Obviously, I do the show and I interview authors and artists and entertainers. And I just love, especially stories about family tradition, or like little like that Robin Williams story, that kind of stuff. I just love that kind of stuff because you can't make it up. I mean, it's so funny because it's true. So let's talk about the growing up in the ice cream shop. I mean, as a kid, I could imagine. It seems like it would have been a lot of fun, but was there also a lot of work involved as well?
Well, it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of friends.
I bet you were the most popular kid in school.
Ice cream.
No, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I love ice cream anyway, and it was very close at hand. I started working. I mean, my dad his work ethic was phenomenal. And one of my first jobs was, back in those days, ice cream was packed in metal churns, 5-gallon metal churns. They were lined in parchment paper, and then ice cream was added. And I started washing those. How old was I? Probably 11 or 12, with a long-handled brush. I'm sure they were washed after I washed them, too. It was just something, they were just teaching me things. And I think I made a quarter a day, something like that. I can't remember. It was not wonderful, but it was okay. Anyway, and then I started learning other things there, but it was great. It was fabulous because ice cream is a happy business.
Yeah,
you're predisposed to be happy, so you start there. And all my friends and everyone loved ice cream, so we enjoyed a lot. And my mother was an amazing chef, cook, pastry especially. So we had Greek pastries abounding.
Oh my gosh.
And it was wonderful. It was just very idyllic is the best word.
I love the Greek festival that they have every year. And, unfortunately, with everything going on this year, they had to cancel it. But I love Greek food. I mean, it's so delicious.
Yeah, it sounds like his mother was just the best. And
yes, she was phenomenal.
Her pastries would sell out at the church bake sales.
People would seek hers out first. They were the ones.
Yeah. So when you all were talking about those days growing up in the ice cream parlor, Melanie, what was maybe a story that just kind of stuck out for you that you're like, this is something different?
Oh well, gosh, I mean the whole thing, it's really fascinating. What I love so much about his family, and especially his dad, is how quickly they integrated into Savannah. I mean, they really jumped into the community. And again, that goes back to where they came from. They were really just doing what they knew. Mm-hmm. And Stratton's dad in particular was deeply involved in the community and civics, and used to have voting booths he would set up in his garage. And, was really, so this was one of my favorite really, and this is truly sort of what I would consider, what I tried to do to carry this particular line throughout the book, is that when you walk into Leopold's today, I think you really feel this warmth and a sense of community, even if you're not from here. And I think what you can attribute that to is it started back with Stratton's father and uncles, and they began this legacy. And so all the things that Stratton and Mary do today are not just sort of, by accident. So, they Stratton is so active as well. And, they have this I Pledge event every summer, and children get free ice cream for saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And they have these creative writing contests with the library, and then the winner, the class, they go get to meet the mayor, and they have an ice cream party, and they do a lot of things like that. Stratton does a lot with as well, or Leopold does a lot with for firefight first responders and military, and he himself sits on many, many, many boards. And so when it's just really interesting. I feel like that's a legacy that has carried through from the very beginning. And I mean, my husband is an immigrant, and he arrived from Cuba not speaking a single word of English, not a word. So certainly his family essentially arrived. Now, by the time they got to Savannah, I'm sure that they spoke some English because they had already been in the U.S. for 4 years. But still, it's hard. And they came in and just jumped in, and they didn't just simply open a shop. I mean, the reason they became successful is because people like to go see them. They felt welcome. It felt like sort of an extension of a home.
Yeah.
And they would arrive, and they'd take their kids, or they'd go there, after football games or after dances or the theater. And that's what still exists today. But it started over 100 years ago. And I love that. That's really was the through line for me for the story. It was not simply saying, well, Stratton just participates on these boards that help the military and the police. No, it's because his father started that tradition, and he's, carried that through. And it was very real. I mean, his father had served in the war, and when he came back, pretty much anyone who walked in with a uniform on, he would just pull out a chair and say, what would you like? And he would,
Nice.
So
it was interesting. Speaking of the war, my dad, if he was going to buy a suit, a shirt, a hat, a handkerchief, whatever, he would typically go to Morris Levy's haberdashery, that which was next to where Levy Jewelers is now, the brick building. It was a man named Morris Levy had a men's store there, and he would always go in, and I went with him if he was getting something from me. Always ask for Morris. He'd come up from the back, and they would talk. I accepted that. I didn't know why he'd always asked for him, but he did. Then when we were researching, we came across some photographs.
Mm-hmm.
And the photographs were of five individuals who enlisted in the Army in 1918 to go fight in the war. And among them were my dad and Morris Levy.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So they fought in France. They fought in France together in World War I, and I had no idea. But then it all became clear.
Yeah, that was really neat, and just completely honored that relationship. So,
Melanie, you and I had talked about my wife being from Mexico City. And so Stratton, my wife is actually from Mexico City. Mm-hmm. And so we went through the process of her becoming a naturalized citizen. And, my kids are Mexican American. And, so I can totally understand. I mean, like, I'm from Cincinnati originally, but my wife, with her moving here, it gave me like a whole fresh perspective of like what we do and how we live here. And, the cultural differences of like, Mexico to here. And, I think it is, I really, that's one of the things I try to impress upon my kids, talking about the work ethic. Like when you're talking about your dad and his work ethic, like I'm just smiling because I'm sitting there looking at my son thinking like, how your dad and his brothers and your family, built this, and they continued on with their traditions with their family. I'm looking at my son. I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, this is what I'm doing with my kids. I'm trying to do the same thing and, passing down those values,
And I think that's why this book has resonated with people, because it was really important to me in telling the story, that it's very easy to look
Yeah.
at Leopold's now, and it's a successful company, and it's, has all these awards, and they've, won and one
Well,
of the
that's
top ice
when
cream
we were
countries.
talking, Melanie, for the article. Like I really didn't. I've never met Stratton or you, and it was an article assignment. And then as we were talking, it was just one of those things where I was like, wow, this is a lot more than just an article. This is, like there's this whole underpinning story that goes throughout. And as I started reading more and doing a little bit more research, I'm like, wow, look at all this stuff that, it's like right here in my own backyard that I never even think about, you know? So that was one of the reasons why I was like, I want to have y'all on the show so we could talk about it. And, I just love the fact that, y'all, this is here, we're doing this today. I think because we all value family and we all have, those morals,
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and the story, it does, it's very relatable. I mean, even
Mm-hmm.
from when his, you know, people, people immigrate here every day and they go through a lot, and it's very easy to see Leopold's as a success, and those lines that circle the block. But it didn't start that way,
Oh yeah, my
and they
friends and I talk
worked
about that all the time. Like people
they
see the
worked
ending of
really,
it.
really hard to
Yeah.
create that. And so,
They see they
and
see
then
the glamour
Stratton
and they
was
see the glory, but people don't see all the work,
right.
turmoil, and
Yeah.
sweat and tears and
All
Right,
the
blood.
years.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
certainly, they still have to work very hard today to keep it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's there was a family story and an immigrant story, and a successful immigrant story, and then of course Stratton keeping that going, and of course his whole career that he's had, or his two careers as producer and
Yeah.
in the ice cream business.
Yeah. Let me do the
So
station
it's
ID real quick. Everybody, you're listening
sure.
today to WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. That actually leads me to another question, Melanie, because I know I didn't really ask you this much about it, but going through this, you're from Savannah, so you grew up here, with Leopold's here, and you're going and seeing it and that kind of stuff. I moved down here when I was like 19, and so what was that like for you as a kid growing up, and then being able to write a book, and working with Stratton and
Oh,
Mary as an adult, what was that like?
this was what was wild. I mean, it was really interesting because I went off to University of Georgia. I was in journalism school there, and my eye was very much on New York, and which is what I did. I took off and I went and worked in publishing there for a while, and was really chasing that dream. And I never expected really to write a book to begin with, and then I ended up, through this kind of crazy, wild adventure I had meeting my husband in Cuba, and then that first book came out. Um, that was fantastic. And then this was a complete surprise. I honestly never thought I'd write another book. I didn't know what I would write it. I just didn't know what I would write it about. And this has been a fascinating experience. And I have a wonderful friendship with Stratton and Mary, which I absolutely adore. And Stratton and I actually right now are, working on film development of La Americana, the memoir that I wrote about meeting my husband in Cuba and spending about, give or
Which
take,
is a wonderful book.
thank you,
True.
about 3 years in Cuba on and off. And when Fidel Castro was still in power, slightly terrifying, but fascinating time for me. And so we are currently getting that up and running. And I couldn't have imagined any of this. I mean, it would just, I don't know what I expected when the first book came out. I don't know. I
Was it kind of like a pinch me moment?
a little bit. It was sort of like when it came out, I was like, okay, what now? I mean, I had worked so hard to get the book done with work and kids and never sleeping, and on and off over 7 years. And by the time I got a book deal, it was like 9 years later. I mean, I finally got an agent 9 years later, and she sold it in 2 weeks. And then it was published a year and a half later. And then that was a wonderful story when I was I had only spoken he was kind enough to let me interview him for a blog of the same title I used to do a lot, La Americana. And was interviewing other people from bicultural backgrounds in Savannah. I had no idea. I was foreshadowing something that we were going to be doing later. I mean, just, and I really just kind of knew of Stratton. And it was funny because maybe energy, is a real thing. He was somebody in my head I wanted to interview. And I didn't even know if he was in Savannah, really, that much. And I was sitting at a little coffee shop in Habersham writing, and he walked in the door. And I thought, well, I better go ahead and just stand up and go talk to him now, or it's never going to happen. And he was so nice. And I walked over and said, I just have this little blog. Is there any chance I could talk to you? And he was like, sure. He said, call so-and-so and set it up.
Yeah.
And we went and chatted, I don't remember, a week or two later. And so, no, I had no idea. But it really has been, I can't even say it was full circle. I just never even imagined, all of this. But
let me piggyback off of that, Stratton.
Yeah.
I want to segue into this with you, Stratton. Obviously, with your position and not just with Leopold's but also with the Hollywood and all that, you meet a lot of folks. So what attracted you to working with Melanie? I mean, like I can tell you my reasons, but I want to hear yours because that's you have a lot of options, right? And Melanie, I feel like is perfect fit for this. But what was the segue for you for wanting to work with her on this?
Well, when we met, I mean, you tend to read people. You tend to fairly quickly, fairly swiftly see what someone's about.
Mm-hmm.
And I sensed a lot of good things. And then when I read the book, I said, wow, she's talented. This is good. Yeah. So then it seemed completely logical to continue in that direction. And we had agreed at that point to start putting a film together based on her first book. And it just made total sense and you have that trust there too, that she will handle material well and be faithful to it and do a grand job, which she did with it.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Molly.
No, I want to say this. So one of the things that I love about Stratton is he supports local talent. It is one of the biggest things he does, and he supports Savannah, Georgia, and he's constantly touting Savannah and Georgia.
Yeah.
And somebody should pay him to be a spokesperson because he does it naturally.
Give you the key to the city.
He really does. And they welcomed me into their home and many, many times to discuss all this, but they really genuinely support local talent and say, listen, you don't necessarily have to go to LA or New York to find talent. There's a load of it here. And it's wonderful. I mean, it's fantastic. But also it was really nice. I mean, I think because we're both from here, there's certain things, you just understand when you're from a place. And so
a shorthand.
Yeah. And we know certainly a number of the same people where you just sort of, understand. Now there was a lot I didn't know for sure. But yeah, it was an honor.
I thought it was interesting because the first time that I talked with you, Melanie, it was kind of like a mishap. I had a couple different things going on and had to reschedule, and then what was going to be Stratton, it was going to be like just a little quick 5-minute phone call, and I think we ended up talking for like over half an hour or something like that, or maybe 45 minutes. It was just talk. We were just talking about like everything under the sun, and especially because my wife's from Mexico City, your husband's from Cuba.
Yes.
There's a lot there, but yeah, I love when you have those kind of I love when it's not like I was telling my son earlier, we were talking about this. I love when you have friendships or relationships where, it's not forced. It just naturally flows,
Yes. And it very much felt like that with Stratton and Mary. And, it was just very easy.
We've got, we actually have about 5 minutes left. Stratton, can you tell us about how you met your wife and how you two fell in love and got married?
How we met was our cousins were married to each other. Now, I know that sounds very Gothic, Southern Gothic. What happened is this. First cousin of mine in Athens, Greece, was married to Mary's third cousin. Now, these cousins had visited my mother in Savannah, my mother and father for decades. They'd come over. Their daughter went to school in the U.S. and never knowing there was a California connection. So they would come here. We'd visit. I mean, I saw them in Greece. Blah blah blah. So I had gone to L.A. and didn't know Mary or her family or nothing. And my cousins had left, had apparently had come to Savannah, then flown to Los Angeles to see the relatives there, and they were having a small party. So my cousin Jimmy, they called him Jimmy. It was Dimitri, but they called him Jimmy. His wife said, Poppy said, Jimmy, you have a cousin out here, don't you? And he said, yeah, I guess so. He saw somewhere out here. Well, should we invite him? Sure, invite him. They asked Mary about inviting me. Yeah, invite him. Then she said, is he still single? And then, of course, but wait a minute. So I got invited. I took an appropriate little, I think I took some chocolates or something just for the thing. I didn't know these folks. I knew my cousins. That was pretty much it. And that's how we met. And then we dated for 5 years because I was always leaving doing movies or coming to Savannah or doing things like that. But I was never in town. And so that's how it started, through mutual cousins. In fact, when we told the priest that in Santa Barbara, he said, stop, I don't want to hear anymore.
Oh, well, isn't it like after third cousins, it's like,
yeah. The eyes don't get too close together.
Right.
You can tell I had fun talking to him for the book.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is great. So where can people pick up the book and find out more information about the book?
Sure. Go ahead, sir.
No, at the shop, of course, we have them there.
Yeah, absolutely. And please, I want to note this because people I know have been freaked out when they see the line around the block. You don't have to stand in that line. So right now, like if you go in the left door, if you're just getting the book, you can go in the door to the left and just, is this correct, Stratton? I think it is.
It is correct.
You can just go straight to the little.
Or pints of ice cream. You go to the left door.
Yes, to the left. There's yes, I ran in there yesterday. There are pints and there's the books and there's a cashier right there. So you don't actually have to stand in line to get an ice cream cone.
And of course at E-Shaver.
E-Shavers, and also the Book Lady, and online. And so Leopold does this wonderful, they will ship, you can do, it's actually, I've had so many people say that for Christmas they're going to do this. They want to ship pints of ice cream and the book, because a lot of people aren't going to be traveling. So this is what they're doing for their Christmas gifts. So,
and I love the fact that, I love the fact that President Carter's favorite ice cream is your butter pecan, because that's one of my favorites.
Well,
so I think that's wonderful.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Well, we send him tubs of it, and I always sneak in some pints of peanut butter in it too.
Nice. Well, thank you all so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
And then I'm hoping sometime early next year, when everything dies down, that y'all can do like some kind of book signing or something like that. That'd be kind of fun to do too. So hoping everything will work out. But thank you very much for being on the show today, y'all.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it very much.